Ted Hughes, Tales from Ovid. The first book. Creation, 4 ages, flood, Lycaon. Now I am ready to tell how bodies are changed into different bodies. I summon the supernatural beings who first contrived the transmogrifications in the stuff of life. You did it for your own amusement. Descend again. Be pleased to reanimate this revival of those marvels. Reveal now exactly how they were performed from the beginning up to this moment. Before sea or land, before even sky, which contains all, nature wore only one mask, since called chaos. A huge agglomeration of upset, a bolus of everything, but as if aborted, and the total arsenal of entropy already at war within it. No sun showed one thing to another, no moon played her phases in heaven, no earth spun in empty air on her own magnet, no ocean basked or roamed on the long beaches. Land, sea, air were all there, but not to be trodden or swum in. Air was simply darkness. Everything fluid or vapour, form formless, each thing hostile to every other thing, at every point hot, cold, moist, dry, soft, hard, and the weightless resisted weight. God, or some such artist as resourceful, began to sort it out. Land here, sky there, and sea there. Up there, the heavenly stratosphere. Down here, the cloudy, the windy. He gave to each its place, independent, gazing about freshly. Also resonating, each one a harmonic of the others, just like the strings that would resound one day in the dome of the tortoise. The fiery aspiration that makes heaven took it to the top. The air, happy to be idle, lay between that and the earth, which rested at the bottom, engorged with heavy metals, embraced by delicate waters. When the ingenious one had gained control of the mass and decided the cosmic divisions, he rolled earth into a ball. Then he commanded the water to spread out flat, to lift itself into waves according to the whim of the wind, and to hurl itself at the land's edges. He conjured springs to rise and be manifest, deep and gloomy ponds, flashing delicious lakes. He educated headstrong, electrifying rivers to observe their banks and to pour part of their delight into earth's dark and to donate the remainder to ocean, swelling the uproar on shores. Then he instructed the plains how to roll sweetly to the horizon. He directed the valleys to go deep and the mountains to rear up, humping their backs. Everywhere he taught the tree its leaf. Having made a pattern in heaven, 2 zones to the left, 2 to the right, and a 5th zone, firier, between, so did the wisdom divide the earth's orb with the same, a middle zone, uninhabitable under the fire, the outermost 2 zones beneath deep snow, and between them 2 temperate zones, alternating cold and heat. Air hung over the earth, but just so much heavier than fire as water is lighter than earth. There the Creator deployed cloud, thunder to awe the hearts of men, and winds to polish the bolt and the lightning. Yet he forbade the winds to use the air as they pleased. Even now, as they are within their wards, these madhouse brothers fighting each other, all but shake the globe to pieces. The east is given to Eurus, Arabia, Persia, all that the morning star sees from the Himalayas. Zephyr lives in the sunset. Far to the north, beyond Scythia, Beneath the great Borea, bristles and turns, opposite in the south, Oster's home is hidden in dripping fog. Over them all, weightless, liquid ether floats, pure, purged of every earthly taint. Hardly had he, the wise man, ordered all this, than the stars, clogged before in the dark huddle of chaos, are lit glittering in their positions. And now, to bring quick life into every corner, he gave the bright ground of heaven to the gods, the stars and the planets. To the fish he gave the waters, to beasts the earth, to birds the air. Nothing was any closer to the gods than these humble beings, none with ampler mind, none with a will masterful and able to rule all the others. Till man came. Either the Maker, conceiving a holier revision of what he had already created, sculpted man from his own ectoplasm, or earth, being such a new precipitate of the etheric heaven, cradled in its dust unearthly crystals. Then Prometheus gathered that fiery dust and slaked it with the pure spring water and rolled it under his hands, pounded it, thumbed it, moulded it into a body shaped like that of a god. Though all the beasts hang their heads from horizontal backbones and study the earth beneath their feet, Prometheus upended man into the vertical, so to comprehend balance, then tipped up his chin, so to widen his outlook on heaven. In this way, the heap of all disorder earth was altered. It was adorned with the godlike novelty of man. And the first age was gold. Without laws enforcers, this age understood and obeyed what had created it. Listening deeply, man kept faith with the source. None dreaded judgment, for no table of crimes measured out the degrees of torture allotted between dismissal and death. No plaintiff prayed in panic to the tyrant's puppet. Undefended, all felt safe and were happy. Then the great conifers ruffled at home on the high hills. They had no premonition of the axe hurtling towards the monarch's parabola, or of the shipyards, or of what other lands they would glimpse from the lift of the ocean's swell. No man had crossed salt water. Cities had not dug themselves in behind deep moats guarded by towers. No sword had bitten its own reflection in the shield. No trumpets magnified the battle cries of lions and bulls out through the mouth holes in helmets. Man needed no weapons. Nations loved one another, and the earth, unbroken by plough or by hoe, piled the table high. Mankind was content to gather the abundance of whatever ripened. Blackberry or strawberry, mushroom or truffle, every kind of nut, figs, apples, cherries, apricots and pears, and ankle-deep acorns under the tree of the thunderer. Spring weather, the airs of spring all year long brought blossom. The unworked earth whitened beneath the bowed wealth of the corn. Rivers of milk mingled with rivers of nectar, and out of the black oak oozed amber honey. After Jove had castrated Saturn under the new reign, the age of silver, lower than gold, but better than the coming age of brass, fell into 4 seasons. Now, as never before, all colour burnt out of it, the air wavered into flame, or icicles strummed in the wind that made them, not in a cave, not in a half-snug thicket, not behind a windbreak of wattles. For the first time, man crouched under a roof at a fire. Now, every single grain had to be planted by hand in a furrow that had been opened in earth by groaning oxen. After this, third in order, the age of brass brought a brazen people, souls fashioned on the same anvil as the blades their hands snatched up before they cooled. But still mankind listened deeply to the harmony of the whole creation and aligned every action to the greater order and not to the moment's blind, apparent opportunity. Last comes the age of iron, and the day of evil dawns. Modesty, loyalty, truth go up like a mist, a morning sigh off a graveyard. Snares, tricks, plots come hurrying out of their dens in the atom. Violence is an extrapolation of the cutting edge into the orbit of the smile. Now comes the love of gain, a new God made out of the shadow of all the others, a God who peers grinning from the roots of the eye teeth. Now sails bulged and the cordage cracked in winds that still bewildered the pilots, and the long trunks of trees that had never shifted in their lives from some mountain fastness leapt in their coffins from wave top to wave top, then out over the rim of the unknown. Meanwhile, the ground, formerly free to all as the air or sunlight, was portioned by surveyors into patches between boundary markers, fences, ditches. Earth's natural plenty no longer sufficed. Man tore open the earth and rummaged in her bowels. Precious ores the Creator had concealed as close to hell as possible were dug up, a new drug for the criminal. So now iron comes with its cruel ideas, and gold with crueler. Combined, they bring war. War, insatiable for the one, with bloody hands employing the other. Now man lives only by plunder. The guest is booty for the host. The bride's father, her heirloom, is a windfall piggy bank for the groom to shatter. Brothers who ought to love each other prefer to loathe. The husband longs to bury his wife and she him. Stepmothers, for the sake of their stepsons, study poisons, and sons grieve over their father's obdurate good health. The inward ear, attuned to the Creator, is underfoot like a dog's turd. Australia, the virgin of justice, the incorruptible last of the immortals, abandons the blood-fouled earth. But not even heaven was safe. Now came the turn of the giants. Excited by this human novelty, freedom from the long sight and hard knowledge of divine wisdom, they coveted the very throne of Jove. They piled to the stars a ramp of mountains, then climbed it. Almighty Jove mobilized his thunderbolts. That salvo blew the top off Olympus, toppled the shattered Pelion off Ossa and dumped it over the giants. They were squashed like ripe grapes. Mother Earth, soaked with their blood, puddled her own clay in it and created out of the sludgy mortar new offspring formed like men. These hybrids were deaf to the intelligence of heaven. They were revolted by the very idea of a God and sought only how to kill each other. The paternal bent for murder alone bred true. Observing all this from his height, Jove groaned. It reminded him of what Lycaon had done at a banquet. As he thought of that, such a fury took hold of the Father of heaven, it amazed even himself. Then the gods jumped to obey his heaven-shaking summons to council. The lesser gods come hurrying from all over the universe. They stream along the Milky Way, their highway, to the Thunderer's throne between wide-open halls ablaze with lights, where the chief gods are housed in the precincts of Jove's palace at the very summit of heaven, as in their own shrines. When the gods had taken their seats, Jove loomed over them. Leaning on his ivory sceptre, he swung back his mane with a movement that jolted the sea, the continents, and heaven itself. His lips curled from the flame of his anger as he spoke. When the giants whose arms came in hundreds, each of them a separate sea monster, reached for heaven, I was less angered. Those creatures were dreadful, but they were few, a single family. Many venomous branches, a single root. They could be plucked out with a single gesture. But now, to the ocean's furthest shore, I have to root out family by family, mankind's teeming millions. Yet I swear by the rivers that run through the underworld, this is what I shall do. You think heaven is safe? We have a population of demigods, satyrs, nymphs, fauns, the playful spirits of wild places, astral entities who loiter about. When we denied these the freedom of heaven, we compensated them with their grottos and crags, their woods and their well springs, their dells and knolls. In all these sanctuaries, we should protect them. Imagine their fears since the uncontrollable Lycaon plotted against me and attempted to do away with me, Jove, King of Heaven, whose right hand rests among thunderheads and whose left sways the assemblies of heaven. The gods roared their outrage. They shouted for instant correction of this madman, just as when those gangsters tried to wash out Rome's name with Caesar's blood. Mankind recoiled, stunned, as at the world's ending, and the very air hallucinated horrors. O Augustus, just as you see now the solicitude of all your people, so did the Father of Heaven survey that of the gods. Just so too the majesty of Jove quieted heaven with a gesture. This crime, he told them, has been fully punished. What it was and how I dealt with it, now let me tell you. The corruption of mankind rose to my nostrils here in heaven as a stench of putrid flesh. Seeking better news of the species, I left Olympus and in the shape of a man walked the earth. If I were to recount in every detail how man has distorted himself with his greed, his lies, his indifference, the end of time, I think, would overtake the reckoning. Alerted as I was still unprepared for what I found. I had crossed Menelaus, the asylum of lions and bears. I had passed Selene and the shaggy heights and gorges of freezing Lycaeus. At nightfall, I came to the unwelcoming hearth of the Arcadian king. I revealed, with a sign, the presence of a god. But when the whole court fell to the ground and worshipped, King Lycaon laughed. He called them credulous fools. The simplest of experiments, he snarled, will show us whether this guest of ours is the almighty God he wants to think him, or some common rascal. Then the truth will stare us all in the face. Lycaon's demonstration was to be the shortest of cuts. He planned to come to my bed where I slept that night and kill me. But he could not resist embellishing his little test with one introductory refinement. Among his prisoners as a hostage was a Molassian. Lycaon picked this man, cut his throat, bled him, butchered him, and while the joints still twitched, put some to bob in a stew, the rest to roast. The moment he set this mess in front of me on the table, I acted. With a single thunderbolt, I collapsed his palazzo. One bang and the whole pile came down onto the household idols and jujus that this monster favoured. The lightning had gone clean through Lycaon. His hair was in spikes. Somehow he staggered, half lifted by the whumping blast, out of the explosion, then out across open ground, trying to scream. As he tried to force out screams, he retched howls. His screams were vomited howls. Trying to shout to his people, he heard only his own howls. Froth lathered his lips, then the bloodthirst natural to him went insane. From that moment, the Lord of Arcadia runs after sheep. He rejoices as a wolf starved near death in a frenzy of slaughter. His royal garments, formerly half his wealth, are a pelt of jagged hair. His arms are lean legs. He has become a wolf. But still his humanity clings to him and suffers in him. The same grisly mane, the same black-ringed yellow pinpoint pupilled eyes, the same demented grimace. His every movement possessed by the same rabid self. So one house is destroyed, but only one. Through the whole earth, every roof is the den of a Lycaon. In this universal new religion, all are fanatics, suckled not by the sweet wisdom of heaven, but by a wolf. All adore, all worship greed, cruelty, the Lycaon in themselves. All are guilty, therefore all must be punished. I have spoken. As he ended, one half the gods added their boom of approval to his rage. The other deepened it with solid and silent assent. All were quietly appalled to imagine mankind annihilated. What would heaven do with a globe full of empty temples, altars attended only by spiders? Was earth's beauty henceforth to be judged solely by the single-minded palates of wild beasts and return to the worm because man had failed? God comforted the gods. If everything were left to him, he promised he could produce a new humanity, different from the first model and far more prudently fashioned. So now Jove set his mind to the deletion of these living generations. He pondered mass electrocution by lightning, but what if the atoms ignited? What if a single ladder of flame rushing up through the elements reduced heaven to an afterglow? Moreover, God as he was, he knew that earth's and heaven's lease for survival is nothing more than a lease, that both must fall together, the globe and its brightness combined like a tear or a single bead of sweat into the bottomless fires of the first, last forge. Afraid that he might touch off that future with such weapons forged in that same smithy, he reversed his ideas. He dipped his anger in the thought of water, rain, downpour, deluge, flood. These could drown the human race and be harmless. In a moment, he had withdrawn the blast that fixes the northern ice. He tethered the parching winds off mountains and out of deserts that bear the flaring blue and crack lips. He gave the whole earth to the south wind. Darkening into the east and into the west, two vast wings of water opened. One thunderhead filled heaven, feathered with darkness, bringing darkness from below the equator. The face of this south wind, as he came, boiled with squalling tempest. Beard and hair were a wall of hurricanes. He dragged the whole oceans up like a peacock shawl, and as he drubbed and wrung the clouds between skyfalls of fist quaking the earth, shocks of thunder dumped the floods. Juno's messenger, the rainbow, swept from earth to heaven, topping up the darkness. Every crop was flattened. The farmer's year of labour dissolved as he wept. But still, there was not water enough in heaven to satisfy Jove's fury. So Neptune, his brother, god of the seas, brought up tidal waves and assembled every river there in the bottom of the ocean and ordered them to open their aquifers, ignoring all confines. The rivers raced back to their sources and erupted. Neptune himself harpooned the earth with his trident. Convulsed, it quaked open, crevice beneath crevice, disgorging the subterranean waters. Now flood heaps over flood. Orchards, crops, herds, farms are scooped up and sucked down into the overland maelstrom. Temples and their statues liquefy. kneeling into the swirls. Whatever roof or spire or turret resists the rip of currents goes under the climbing levels, till earth and sea seem one, a single sea without a shore. A few crowds are squeezed on diminishing islets of hilltops. Men are rowing in circles aimlessly, crazed where they ploughed straight furrows or steered wagons. One pitches a sail over corn. Another steers his keel over his own chimney. One catches a fish in the top of an elm. Anchors drag over grazing or get a grip under vine roots. Where lean goats crane for brown tufts, fat seals gambol over and under each other. The nereids roam astounded through submerged gardens, swim in silent wonder into kitchens, touch the eyes of marble busts that gaze down long halls under the wavering light. Dolphins churn through copses. Dolphins churn through copses, hunting their prey into oak trees. They shake out acorns that sink slowly. Wolves manage a while, resting their heads on drowned and floating sheep. Lions ride exhausted horses. Tigers try to mount foundering bullocks. The strong stag's fine, long legs, growing weedier, tangle in undercurrents. The wild boar, the poor swimmer, soon goes under. Even his faithful, heavy defenders, the thunderbolt and lightning flash of his tusks, have joined the weight against him. Birds grow tired of the air. The ocean, with nowhere else to go, makes its bed in the hills, pulling its coverlet over bare summits, while starvation picks off the survivors. Drowned mankind, imploring limbs outspread, floats like a plague of dead frogs. And so ends the first book.